I wanted it to be a story that moved the way a good story moves in cinema.
What obsesses a filmmaker who treats crime like military strategy? Michael Mann doesn't just make movies about cops and criminals. He studies them like a scientist. Every gunfight is carefully planned. Every character detail comes from real research.
Because no matter what, you will not get in my way. We've been face to face.
Behind those perfect shots and intense action scenes is a director who wants to understand how professionals think when their lives are on the line. Mann spends years preparing each film. He talks to real detectives. He studies actual criminals. He learns how they work, how they think, how they survive in dangerous situations. 10 movies became his textbooks.
Nothing in particular. What fascinates me, what I'm drawn to, is drama.
Teaching him that the best crime stories show people doing their jobs under extreme pressure. These weren't just films he enjoyed watching. They were lessons in how to make realistic characters who feel like real people instead of movie heroes. From bank robbers to police detectives, from hitmen to FBI agents, Mann learned that the most interesting stories happen when skilled professionals face choices that could destroy everything they care about. Mann discovered that audiences want to see characters who are good at what they do, even when what they do is dangerous or illegal. These 10 directors taught him how to make crime films that feel authentic instead of fake. Here are the movies that taught Michael Mann how to turn criminal stories into studies of professional dedication and personal sacrifice. 10. Manhunter, 1986. Mann didn't adapt a thriller. He created a psychological battle between damaged minds. When Mann made Manhunter, he was exploring his own fascination with how law enforcement officers think like criminals to catch them.
It means that in the present tense of the film, the way the people are, how they look, how they act, how they talk, is a fractal.
Will Graham, an FBI profiler who can get inside serial killers' heads, became Mann's study of how hunting monsters changes the hunter. William Peterson's performance as Graham showed Mann how dangerous it is when your job requires you to think like the people you're trying to stop. Graham's ability to understand killers comes from a dark place in his own mind. This psychological cost, where doing your job well might destroy your peace of mind, became central to every Mann character who gets too deep into their work. The film's visual style, with bright colors and electronic music, created a world that felt both modern and timeless. Mann used these techniques to show how the hunter and the hunted are connected in ways that neither wants to admit. Tom Noonan's serial killer isn't just evil. He's a broken person whose crimes have their own twisted logic. The investigation scenes, showing real FBI methods and procedures, taught Mann that authentic details make impossible situations feel believable. Graham's process of understanding the killer by studying crime scenes became Mann's template for characters who solve problems through careful observation and professional expertise. Manhunter proved that the most interesting crime stories happen inside people's minds, not just in action sequences. 9. The French Connection, 1971. Friedkin didn't make a police movie. He built a machine that creates anxiety.
Police emergency, I need your car. I need your car. When am I going to get back?
When Mann discovered the French Connection, he found his education in how police obsession can become personally destructive.
The appeal to me of the film was to involve audience as intensely as I could do into characters.
Popeye Doyle, a detective hunting French drug dealers in New York, became Mann's template for law enforcement officers whose job becomes their entire identity. Gene Hackman's performance as Doyle showed Mann how cops can become as dangerous as the criminals they chase. Doyle uses violence and breaks rules to get results. His methods work, but they also isolate him from normal society. This idea that being good at police work might make you a bad person in regular life influenced every Mann character who sacrifices personal relationships for professional success. The famous car chase scene, with real cars on real New York streets, taught Mann that authentic action feels more exciting than fake stunts. Friedkin used actual locations and dangerous driving to create tension that audiences could feel in their bodies. The chase wasn't just entertainment. It showed how far Doyle would go to catch his target. The The film's documentary style, showing real police procedures and actual investigation techniques, demonstrated how authentic details make fictional stories feel true. Doyle's partnership with his fellow detective, based on mutual respect and shared obsession, became Mann's model for professional relationships that survive extreme pressure. The French Connection proved that the most compelling police stories show how law enforcement work changes the people who do it. 8. Point Blank, 1967. Borman didn't make a revenge story. He built a puzzle about whether revenge is even possible. When Mann discovered Point Blank, he found his masterclass in how single-minded determination can drive an entire narrative.
We bring into formation of character or the ambiance of a scene that makes an actor feel a certain way.
Walker, betrayed by his wife and partner during a robbery, becomes an unstoppable force seeking what he's owed. Lee Marvin's performance as Walker showed Mann how a character could function like a machine built for one purpose. Walker doesn't waste words or emotions. He moves through the story with mechanical precision, demanding his money from a criminal organization that might not even exist anymore. This focused approach, where characters become defined by their professional goals, influenced every Mann protagonist who pursues objectives with tunnel vision. The film's visual style, using bold colors and strange camera angles, created a world that felt both real and dreamlike. Borman's direction suggested that Walker might be dead, making his entire revenge quest a dying man's fantasy. This psychological ambiguity taught Mann how crime stories could explore deeper questions about identity and reality. The criminal organization Walker fights, presented as a modern corporation with offices and meetings, showed Mann how contemporary crime operates like legitimate business. The film's Alcatraz setting, a prison island that traps both criminals and visitors, became Mann's understanding of how criminal life creates its own form of imprisonment. Point Blank proved that the most interesting revenge stories question whether getting what you want actually solves anything. 7. Taxi Driver, 1976. Scorsese didn't create a character. He performed surgery on American loneliness.
Okay, take your hand off. Okay, then just leave. Take it off. All right, just leave then. Come on.
When Mann discovered Taxi Driver, he found his study of how city life can drive people to dangerous places.
Whether it's a war film or not a war film, it means a couple of things. One is that there's usually a drive into tough political questions.
Travis Bickle, driving his cab through New York's dark streets every night, became Mann's template for characters whose isolation transforms them into something they never intended to become. Robert De Niro's performance as Travis showed Mann how ordinary people can become threats when they spend too much time alone with their thoughts. Travis starts as a lonely man trying to connect with society, but his inability to understand normal social behavior gradually turns him into a potential killer. This transformation, where good intentions become twisted by isolation, influenced every Mann character who loses touch with reality while pursuing their goals. The film's nighttime New York setting, with neon lights and empty streets, taught Mann how cities can function as mirrors for characters' mental states. Travis sees the city as corrupt and dangerous because that's how he feels inside. Scorsese's camera work, often showing Travis from inside his taxi looking out, created the feeling of watching the world through a disturbed person's eyes. The film's famous mirror scene, where Travis practices conversations with imaginary enemies, became Mann's understanding of how people can become dangerous when they create their own version of reality. Travis's final transformation into a vigilante showed Mann how personal inadequacy can disguise itself as heroic action. Taxi Driver proved that the most frightening criminals are those who believe they're saving the world. 6. The Conformist, 1970. Bertolucci didn't analyze political evil. He traced where it comes from in people's minds. When Mann discovered The Conformist, he found his education in how personal weakness can lead people to embrace dangerous systems.
There is awareness of politically and socially feel an obligation to represent something, because that's the driving impetus of the film.
Marcello, a man trying to appear normal by joining fascist Italy, became Mann's study of how individuals sacrifice their morality to fit in with powerful groups. Jean-Louis Trintignant's performance as Marcello showed Mann how people can become evil, not through strength, but through cowardice. Marcello joins the fascists because he's afraid of being different or standing out. His need to appear normal leads him to commit terrible acts against people he once considered friends. This idea that conformity can be more dangerous than rebellion influenced Mann's characters who compromise their values to succeed professionally. The film's visual style, using shadows and reflections to show Marcello's psychological state, taught Mann how cinematography could represent internal conflict. Bertolucci's camera work made Marcello's mental confusion visible through the way scenes were lit and framed. The film's 1930s Italian setting, showing how fascism appealed to ordinary people seeking security, demonstrated how historical stories can explain contemporary problems. Marcello's relationship with his former professor, whom he eventually betrays, became Mann's template for characters whose personal relationships become casualties of their professional ambitions. The Conformist proved that the most dangerous people are often those trying hardest to appear normal and respectable. 5. Heat, 1995. Mann created his masterpiece by making a cop and criminal who are almost the same person. When Mann made Heat, he was examining his own career-long fascination with professionals on opposite sides of the law.
Basically, Macaulay is getting, assaulted from Hanna's group from one side, and you got a roadblock on the other.
Vincent Hanna, the obsessive detective, and Neil Macaulay, the methodical thief, became Mann's definitive statement about how dedication to your work can consume everything else in your life. Robert De Niro and Al Pacino's performances showed Mann how enemies can respect each other's skills while still trying to destroy each other. Both men are excellent at their jobs, but their professional success ruins their personal relationships. Hanna's marriage fails because he can't stop thinking about cases. Macaulay lives alone because emotional attachments make him vulnerable. This parallel, where cops and criminals make identical sacrifices for their work, represented everything Mann had learned about professional obsession. The film's Los Angeles setting, with its sprawling highways and glass buildings, became Mann's vision of the modern American city as a battlefield. The famous coffee shop scene, where Hanna and Macaulay meet face-to-face, taught Mann that the most powerful dramatic moments happen when characters acknowledge their similarities rather than their differences. Heat's 3-hour length allowed Mann to fully explore how professional dedication affects every aspect of these men's lives. The film proved that Mann's greatest stories emerge when he shows how being good at dangerous work changes who you are as a person. 4. Le Samouraï, 1967. Melville didn't make a crime film. He created a meditation on professional loneliness. When Mann discovered Le Samouraï, he found his perfect study of how criminal work requires complete emotional detachment.
That I want audiences to be there and passively hear this story that's being told. It's that I want them in the film. I want them projected.
Jeff Costello, a hitman who follows a strict personal code, became Mann's template for characters who treat illegal work like an art form. Alain Delon's performance as Jeff showed Mann how criminals can maintain dignity through professional discipline. Jeff lives alone, speaks little, and follows precise routines. He approaches each job like a craftsman, planning every detail and accepting the isolation that comes with his chosen profession. This idea that criminal work demands the same dedication as legitimate careers influenced every Mann character who takes pride in doing dangerous work well. The film's visual style, using minimal colors and empty spaces, taught Mann how stripped-down aesthetics can make characters more compelling. Melville's Paris feels cold and lonely, reflecting Jeff's emotional state. The film's slow pace, following Jeff through his daily routines, demonstrated how methodical behavior can create suspense. Jeff's relationship with the police inspector hunting him, based on mutual professional respect, became Mann's model for adversaries who understand each other's methods. The inspector recognizes Jeff's skill and treats the investigation like a chess match between equals. This professional courtesy between enemies, where competence earns respect regardless of legal standing, became fundamental to Mann's approach to crime stories. Le Samouraï proved that the most interesting criminals are those who follow their own strict rules. 3. Mean Streets, 1973. Scorsese turned Little Italy into a pressure cooker for masculine identity. When Mann discovered Mean Streets, He found his education in how neighborhood loyalty conflicts with personal survival.
Because Martin Scorsese and Francis Coppola became executive producers, and kudos to them for restoring that film.
Charlie, trying to balance his Catholic guilt with street credibility, became Mann's study of characters caught between competing moral systems. Harvey Keitel's performance as Charlie showed Mann how personal relationships can become professional liabilities. Charlie feels responsible for his reckless friend Johnny Boy, but protecting him puts Charlie's own future at risk. This tension between loyalty to friends and self-preservation influenced every Mann character who must choose between personal bonds and professional success. Robert De Niro's Johnny Boy, whose impulsive behavior creates problems for everyone around him, taught Mann how one person's lack of discipline can destroy an entire group's careful planning. Johnny Boy gambles money he doesn't have and makes enemies he can't handle, forcing Charlie to clean up messes he didn't create. The film's handheld camera work, following characters through crowded bars and narrow streets, showed Mann how intimate cinematography can make audiences feel like they're part of the action. Scorsese's use of real New York locations, with actual neighborhood residents, created authenticity that studio sets couldn't match. The film's jukebox soundtrack, mixing popular songs with violent action, became Mann's template for using music to comment on character behavior rather than just provide background atmosphere. The contrast between romantic music and street violence taught Mann how sound could create emotional complexity within single scenes. Mean Streets proved that the most compelling crime stories emerge from specific cultural environments where everyone knows everyone else's business. 2. Thief, 1981. Mann didn't make a heist film. He built a character study around criminal expertise. When Mann created Thief, he was examining his own fascination with professionals who take pride in illegal work.
Frank Holmheimer was a thief and a home invader, and I got interested in his book and then discarded all of it.
Frank, a master safecracker planning one final score before retirement, became Mann's definitive portrait of the criminal as a craftsman. James Caan's performance as Frank showed Mann how criminals can maintain dignity through professional excellence. Frank treats burglary like skilled labor, using proper tools and proven techniques. He follows strict personal rules about who he works with and what jobs he accepts. This approach, where criminal work requires the same discipline as legitimate careers, became central to every Mann character who succeeds through careful preparation. The film's Chicago setting, with its neon-lit streets and industrial landscapes, taught Mann how urban environments can reflect characters' emotional states. Frank lives in a world of artificial light and hard surfaces, matching his tough exterior and guarded personality. Tangerine Dream's electronic music score created a modern atmosphere that made criminal work feel both timeless and contemporary. The film's technical sequences, showing actual safe-cracking methods, demonstrated how authentic procedural details can make impossible situations feel believable. Frank's relationship with Jessie, the woman he hopes to build a normal life with, became Mann's template for characters whose criminal past conflicts with their desire for legitimate happiness. His detailed plan for domestic life, complete with house pictures and family goals, showed Mann how criminals could dream of normalcy while remaining trapped by their professional skills. Thief proved that Mann's greatest interest lies in showing how professionals maintain their standards under extreme pressure, even when those standards involve breaking the law. 1. The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, 1948. Houston didn't make an adventure film. He performed an autopsy on American greed. When Mann discovered The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, he found his masterclass in how environmental pressure reveals people's true nature.
Became one of them shooting this film, what kind of compositions, where's the camera, how do I bring audience, how do I create that connection?
Fred C. Dobbs, starting as a desperate job seeker and transforming into a paranoid killer, became Mann's template for ordinary men pushed beyond their moral limits. Humphrey Bogart's performance as Dobbs showed Mann how good people can become dangerous when circumstances get extreme. Dobbs begins the film as sympathetic, just trying to earn enough money to survive. But the Mexican desert's harsh conditions and the stress of protecting gold gradually turn him into someone willing to kill his partners for a bigger share. Walter Huston's Howard, the experienced prospector who understands that survival requires keeping your humanity, became Mann's model for mentor characters who provide moral guidance. Howard warns his younger partners that gold changes people, but they don't listen until it's too late. The film's desert setting, unforgiving and isolating, taught Mann how extreme environments can strip away social pretenses and reveal who people really are underneath. The partnership between three men, which starts with mutual respect and ends in betrayal and murder, influenced every Mann's story about professionals whose shared goals become individual obsessions. The film's exploration of how paranoia spreads between partners, with each man suspecting the others of planning betrayal, became Mann's understanding of how trust breaks down under extreme pressure. Dobbs's final transformation into a laughing madman, destroyed by his own greed, showed Mann that the most tragic criminals are those who destroy themselves, pursuing things that ultimately prove worthless. The Treasure of the Sierra Madre proved that Mann's most powerful stories show how ordinary people become criminals when pushed to their breaking point by circumstances beyond their control. Mann learned from these masters that the most compelling crime stories show professionals facing impossible choices. 10 films taught him that authentic drama emerges from authentic methodology, that the most dangerous people are often the most dedicated ones. Subscribe to explore how other directors study the psychology of dedication, obsession, and the price of professional excellence.